He worked himself into fits of fury because he just loved being mad.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always.
Hello friends, trace amounts of science. Today I think we are going to wrap up the Married Mary saga. Officially. This time it's officially official. We're wrapping up Mary and Funky P, and maybe OP will write something else, similar to that plague doctor thing that we did a few weeks ago. Insane health myths. Yes, it takes a bit more production, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. So go watch it, please, if you haven't. Or watch it again if you have. OP and myself and my editor Elijah all worked really hard on it. Okay, with all that said, let's get this thing wrapped. I'm excited to see how it goes. Thank you for joining me today. The abridged goblinization. Married Mary / Funky P wrap-up. Part 1. It's not actually a finale, as is explained shortly. I got all dramatic and titled this the finale. It's really not. It's more of a wrap-up. Finale implies grandiosity and thoughtful reflection. I tried to reflect, but I think some past mistakes will forever remain impossible to explain. Yeah, it's just brain stuff. What do you want? I'll try to laugh at myself as much as possible. I'll slip in a few previously untold funky horrors. I'll reveal some more crazy crap that Mary pulled, and I'll tell you where certain folks are now. But this is going to be a little all over the place, and I'm constantly going to break the fourth wall. I really need to work on my endings. My penultimate chapters are usually funny, though. I learned that penultimate means second to the last. And if we're talking about the video before this one, was that Cadillac Kirk? It's pretty fucking funny, honestly. He finger blasted a pie in the middle of a restaurant. For the blissfully uninitiated, this is the final installment of Married Mary and the sort of lead-in to Funky P Beard. I had originally intended to give a painfully detailed account of how Whiskers, the eccentric do-gooder who occasionally drank too much and displayed pitiably awkward insecurities, gradually transformed into Funky P, the unremittingly enraged alcoholic psycho with a penchant for snacking on stinky snatch and making very little effort to hide that fact. How often does he get cold sores? Can I ask you that? You probably don't know because it's covered by a giant beard. That's why he keeps the giant beard. If you shave the beard off, it's just rubbed red raw from lice and herpes. But something kept telling me that the vignettes chronicling the goblinization just didn't belong on the internet. Funky's only funny when he's acting like a psycho in front of a group of people who will either openly mock him, call him out, beat his ass, or unapologetically steal his girlfriend. Or all of the above, as happened in Funky P. That isn't to say that I never called him on his crap or mocked him for a whole host of absurd breaches of the social contract. I did that quite a bit, and it did absolutely no good. But ultimately I decided that when the entire story is nothing but this super uncomfortable brand of claustrophobic cringe, it ceases to be enjoyable on any level at all. I take that as a challenge. I could make it enjoyable, but it's up to you whether to write it or not. Closest thing we have to claustrophobic cringe currently is Ted the Caver over on Dayton Dies, read by Ramtide. Check that out. I'm gonna pin it in the comment. I'm really trying to get Dayton Dies off the ground, you know. Anyway, let me briefly remind the readers of the state that I was in when I initially began to consider dating Whiskey, the secret beardo. I wasn't actively pining over Dennis at that point, but a fake version of him was still living rent-free in my nucleus accumbens. Once those catecholamines started dancing up and down the mesolimbic pathway, a cute little crush becomes a blight in your brain that's impossible to evict. Yeah, motherfucker getting on my nerves like a myelin sheath. See, I do science too. I thought maybe I could evict the blight by dating someone new. Someone kind and consistent. Someone tall and ugly as opposed to short and dreamy. Someone who could be more chill, but there were a million other things that I could have done. I could have just toughed it out, felt those uncomfortable feelings and waited for them to pass. Probably the healthiest option. I could have dated a variety of guys. Hell, I could have branched out and dated a nice variety of, people. I could have taken solace in my cringy diary and in writing funny love songs. Whether my songs are super cringe or remarkably relatable depends on the listener, I guess. But even if my songs are absolute garbage, They were better coping mechanisms than dating a weird dude and waiting around for the attraction to magically manifest as though it were some kind of arranged marriage. Well, yeah, could have made better choices, could have made worse ones too. It's just life, we're all here to learn. Surprisingly, a certain affection toward pre-funky whiskey did manifest. It wasn't physical attraction per se, but it felt more mature than physical attraction, somehow. Yeah, all those boomer jokes told me that I am supposed to hate my partner. This must be what growing up feels like. When he was wearing his mask, he was attentive, protective, validating, considerate, and affectionate. Everything that I wanted, on paper. Did I see the warning signs and make a conscious choice to ignore them? No! I'd never dated a neckbeard before! Why is that impossible for some people to understand? Well, some people consume and or make this content a lot. And if that's the case, especially when it's in a neckbeard story, it's pretty easy to see the flags waving high. But I'm of the opinion that we should offer, some sort of forgiveness. Even for the neckbeards, and especially for ourselves. OP continues, I'm getting salty, because I think a few of you guys lack empathy. So I'm gonna flip it around and try to be empathetic toward the people who had made me bristle a bit. You guys are probably beard scientists. You've probably been reading Neckbeard Niceguy incel Reddit posts since before I knew what Reddit was. You might be a little beardy yourself and are hyper aware of the warning signs because you personally had to rein them in. Whatever your reasoning, it seems unfathomably stupid to you when I say that I didn't know the signs of a beardy beau at the time in 2011. A few of you have been kind enough to say, OP's not stupid, she was so obviously willfully blind to the signs. I mean, it's entirely possible to be intelligent in certain issues and naive in other senses, but my life experiences have probably been drastically different from yours. That doesn't mean that my experiences are invalid. All of this, very true, but certain things you gotta learn to let them slide, I get people talking shit in the comments every day. You either take it on board as constructive criticism, or you say, hey, that doesn't sound true to me, and you ignore it. Anyway, okay, I'm done being salty. For now. Gotta leave some salt in the communal OP shaker, so the hot dog man can season his next post. God, we are about due, aren't we? I hope nothing bad happened to him. To lighten the mood, I'd love to share this one little tidbit from the original version of the Goblinization because ReddX referred to it in one of the installments of the Shadowrun saga, and I laughed until I cried. The very first extreme fight I ever had with Funky was over Jackass. I had just watched the fart helmet stunt when Funky arrived at my place. Oh, it's such a good one. Probably one of the best segments from Jackass ever. When I explained why I was in stitches, he read me the riot act for laughing at dumb shit and not living up to his expectations of me as a serious, well-mannered girlfriend. I mean, you have to understand, he was an intellectual. Am I allowed to beg Elijah to play the Jackass clip one more time? I mean, YouTube didn't strike us for it the first time, so Elijah, if you please. But before the masks slipped, he was often a delightful companion. He took me to carnivals and was a good sport about riding the rides, at least the ones he wasn't too tall for. He smushed cotton candy into his bushy beard and didn't get mad when I laughed hysterically and took pictures. He took me to the puppy petting zoo when I was feeling stressed at school. He'd curl up on the couch with me and play with my hair while we watched movies, and he introduced me to my new favorite boba place. There were good times. Well, yeah, I have to expect that much. Beginning stages of a relationship, that's as good as it's ever gonna get. And these times do sound pretty good. Sometimes it declines a lot faster than other times. As we learned, I guess. And not just in the beginning. Between bouts of rage, Funky would simmer down and sporadically behave this way throughout the relationship. None of this makes the untreated alcoholism or the mind games or the irrational outbursts okay. I just wanted to include a blurb about the not-so-bad stuff. To double down on clarity here, because it feels important, being nice from time to time does not let you off the hook for being an irascible tyrant and treating another human being like garbage. Wait a minute, you're telling me being nice isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card? Then what the hell have I been being nice for? TLDR for the whole goblinization saga. Funky acts normal, then he acts like an apoplectic Weisenheimer, then he grovels at my feet, often literally, and cries like a little bitch. Then he wallows in debilitating depression, which, I don't know, might not be an act, in fairness to Funky. Then he goes nuclear and hurls disgusting threats at me, my academic endeavors, my side jobs, my friends, my family, my property, and then he acts like a normal human being for a while, and the cycle begins anew. At long last, my Pollyanna outlook begins to crack, and I see him for the irrational rage beast that he is. Yes, the cycle of maltreatment. It's got all the parts. Tensions build up, everything explodes, then you have a little honeymoon period while the tensions build up again. But again, how would you know without having experienced that for yourself? I wish I could tell you one specific outlandish display of beardery that shattered that Pollyanna outlook I had. Believe it or not, it served me fairly well until I got tangled up with Funky. But that Pollyanna outlook shattered gradually, alongside the gradual realization that this was my freaking life, and I was sharing it with an angry ogre, just to prove to myself that I could like a guy who liked me back. I lost friends because Funky scared them away. I lost interest in activities that I'd once enjoyed because Funky was always around to make those activities miserable. It's really all just a blur of bitterness and boredom. Yeah, he was doing his best to try and isolate you from any support system. I don't know if all this was conscious, but it is fucking devious. Of course, all this is until the crazy Shadowrun weekend happened. That's when I remembered how much I enjoyed the world beyond the Funky bubble. I saw an opportunity, and I popped that Funky bubble with a shard of my shattered Pollyanna outlook. And I've never regretted running away. Not for a millisecond. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. Although, I smile when I think back on how things shook out in the end. If I had fled the country as soon as I realized Funky was a psycho, well, I wouldn't have the crazy Shadowrun story. I wouldn't have my awesome Shadowrun friends, and I wouldn't have fully learned the hardest lessons. Yeah, people are so scared to run away, to escape any sort of confrontation. There are some things that are worth standing and fighting for, and if you get your ass kicked, well, you learned something, didn't you? It's just life stuff. Here's another part called How Funky Got His Freak On. I will address a completely fair question that I came across in the comment section of an earlier Funky P video. How the hell did a freak like Funky have so many randos? Well, I trust that most of you are familiar with the term lot lizards. After the Chris Trucker saga, I hope we all are. Well, on the dodgy end of Wellsprings, there's an encampment under a bridge. We call it the Dodge Street Encampment, and there were plenty of dodgy doxies that drummed up business there, and Funky was a regular. He also had decent success at beer goggles, picking up undiscerning drunk girls. That's pretty gross. You know, if people stopped doing shit like this, we could get rid of gonorrhea overnight. But it's not gonna happen. He was even able to score with a few highfalutin hippie housewives who frequented the vegan gastropub where he worked. Ooh, these hoes ain't loyal. Since he had to wear a mask on the job, it wasn't too difficult to keep it on for a quick, lucrative tumble in the storage room. They tipped him generously in exchange for the discretion that he falsely promised. But he preferred the drunks and the pros, since he felt no pressure to perform with them. Oh, come on, that's terrible. You have to perform. It's supposed to be fun for everybody. Except the ones you paid for, I guess. Anyway, yet again, I feel the need to remind the readers and listeners that Funky wasn't an unsightly fat slob. He didn't stink until after the hanky-panky, and even then, that depended on the hygiene of his partner. And he was scary good at reining in the crazy when he wanted something. Why didn't all this bother me more? Well, the short answer is because there were far worse things to worry about. The longer answer involves a boring discussion of being kind of asexual and typically not giving a flip about physical intimacy. Basically, those randos managed to get me off the hook. It's a strange way to live, but not my experience, so you can do as you please. Sort of like them housewives that marry a rich, powerful man and know that he's cheating with the secretary, but they're like, whatever, at least I got all my stuff paid for. Except Funky P's not paying for anything. That's the part that's a mystery to me. I valued the girlfriend label more than I valued the piss-awful relationship itself. In my mind, at the time, the label served as armor against accusations of self-loathing. Oh, you have a boyfriend! You must be so happy! Oh, he's ugly? Well, he must be nice. You must have a ton of self-respect. That was the voice in my head, but she sounded a lot like a pick-me. And now I find recounting tales of this piss-awful relationship often leads to accusations of self-loathing. It's so frustrating! Gah! It does sound like that's a big chip on your shoulder that you have to overcome. Don't ask me for advice, I struggle with self-loathing to this very day. I just try not to present that side of myself too often. I mean, sure, some days I feel better about myself than others, but in my opinion, having a strong, steady sense of self-awareness is far more important than getting overly concerned with loving yourself all the damn time. That's exhausting. Having a bad day and feeling self-critical from time to time is not a mental disorder. In fact, if you learn to sit with those uncomfortable feelings and look at yourself objectively, something that's far easier to do when you're feeling not so hot, well, then you might accidentally experience some personal growth. Fuck yeah, we only grow from uncomfortable situations. I'm totally with this thought, OP. Let's all be uncomfortable. I'm so freaking sick of these TikTok self-love cults that basically just encourage people to not lift a finger towards any semblance of betterment and to become self-obsessed snobs. Did I just sound old? I don't care. Wait, what was I talking about? I mean, it's a good tangent to get off on because I feel much the same way. The internet's made everyone feel like they're the main character. Spend fucking hours primping and preening themselves and never take a look with a critical eye. That's why things are the way they are, you see. So if you're old, OP, I'm being old with you. It's fine. Anyway, right. My icky love life in the 20-teens. The truth was that Funky and I were totally using each other. He needed a grad student girlfriend to make him look smarter. I needed a boyfriend, any boyfriend, to prove to my imaginary critics that I was capable of liking a guy who would like me back and stick around. Funky stuck around all right, like a very angry dingleberry. But was there ever any semblance of love between us? Yeah, at first, I think. But does it count if he was wearing a mask and I was forcing my feelings? No, it doesn't. If his attentive gentleman act hadn't been bullshit, would I have grown to genuinely love him? I mean, I guess it would have depended on... scratch that. No! I would have crossed paths with Axton eventually, and then I would have rightfully been the villain in Funky's story. I would have ditched the bearded buffoon even if he'd been genuinely nice, because the chemistry with Axton just came more naturally. Our personalities meshed more comfortably, and we never tried to customize each other. But if it hadn't been Axton, would it have been someone else? I mean, I don't think it would have clicked as effortlessly, but yeah, I was desperate to jump ship. Even if he was a gentleman, you would have jumped ship? Yeah, I mean, I guess. Physical attraction's really high up there on the list for me, so I get it. All said, basically, I just wasn't that into Funky. And I think he could sense that, which must have sucked. Seriously, shame on me for not walking away as soon as I failed to feel the feelings that I was trying to force. Funky would have been well within his rights to dump me. I wasn't a good girlfriend to him. He should have been relieved when I wanted to break up. I wouldn't have even cared if he called me names and stormed out. If only he'd gone away for good. But I'd never been with a guy who fought so angrily and irrationally for a relationship that neither one of us really cared about. He's a lost soul. He doesn't know what he wants either. The boyfriend label also gives him meaning. You see, all this makes no sense. Maybe if we had even once had a rational conversation, I'd have a better understanding of what went wrong with the relationship in general, but all I remember is a brief time period where things seemed romantically promising, and then resentment stacked on resentment, stacked on resentment, stacked on bullshit, and then we stacked that on a little more resentment. And it wasn't just him. I contributed to the shitty resentment tower as well. He resented me for not snail trailing over him. I resented him for resenting me. He resented me for resenting him and for not snail trailing. I resented him for trying to dictate how my body reacted to intimate situations and for resenting me. And of course, it just seemed to snowball from there. Yep, it's not functional. As long as we can all admit that, then let's get while the getting's good. Or not necessarily good, but not as bad as it could be. I'm trying to put myself back in the mindset that I had at the time, and it's eluding me. It was easy to remember how things felt during the Dennis debacle. Then again, Dennis simply hurt my feelings. He never traumatized me. I think my brain might be hiding elements of the funky farce in order to protect me. It's cool, brain. I'm trying to explain one of the dumbest things I've ever done. Explain it to who? Bunch of random strangers on the internet? Oh, that's a bad idea, you say? You're locking things up even more tightly to keep me from publicly making an ass out of myself? Well, thanks, Brain.
All right, Brain. You don't like me and I don't like you. But let's just do this and I can get back to killing you with beer.
Nah, it's a good thing. Brain's always out here doing the most. But I've already shown my whole ass and the reactions have been a mixed bag. The rude reactions annoy me, because most of them come from a top-mount stupid, but the supportive reactions more than make up for the few moments of minor annoyance. And a number of critical but fair comments have actually helped me to grow as a writer, so yeah, I'm doing okay, Brain. Oh, leave him alone. Brain's just trying to help. He's just concerned. Or I guess she's just concerned since it's OP. I guess that's a discussion for another video. In this video, we move on to the next part, the overly tolerant quote-unquote wretch batch. That's me right here, sweetie. Biggest brat you ever saw. But why didn't I just leave? Well, first of all, just is one of the most insensitive and ignorant-ass words in the English language. If it were just that easy, most people would just do the difficult or impossible things that seem easy to others because they've had different experiences. Secondly, I did just leave many times, and then Funky would weep pitifully or apologize, blame his depression or anxiety, and this excuse worked embarrassingly well on a psych grad student who attended required weekly seminars on empathy and emotional validation. I mean, you could validate his emotions to still leave. But yeah, he is sort of a psycho-stalker alcoholic, so I don't know. Probably a good reason to be scared to leave. Anyway, I learned as an undergrad that we should all try to avoid committing the fundamental attribution error, the tendency to blame the situation for our own fuck-ups, while blaming the stupidity or terrible disposition of others for their fuck-ups. Yeah, a little bit of ego-maxing, isn't it? But the professors should have added the caveat that sometimes people really are just batshit crazy dickheads. Seeing as I hadn't endured over a year of watching Funky's temper tantrums yet, I kept trying to figure out which situation was making him so volatile, but studying to be a therapist doesn't turn you into a human lie detector, or a psychic, or a caller-outer on all manners of bullshit. In the earliest stages of training, remember I was a first year at the time of these events, there's just a lot of trying on different styles of therapy. So commence the therapy training montage. We need a montage. Montage.
Simple little montage.
This week it's all CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, not the other CBT. Or maybe it is that for sex therapists who specialize in BDSM. I don't really know. I don't even know what the hell we're talking about, so I'm gonna let that one pass me by. Don't even bother telling me what it's supposed to mean in the comments. I like my innocence. I know far too much about other things that I'd rather never know. Let's just let this sleeping dog lie. I mostly ended up teaching teenagers why rubbers are important and why a V-card is nothing to be ashamed of. Oh, now it's solution-focused therapy. Structural family therapy? Nah, screw that, I'm a Rogerian, but I'm also super into narrative therapy. Throw in some existentialism, no psychodynamic bullshit, ever. Wait, Jung actually had a few good points. Humanistic approach? A little narrative therapy where we weave archetypes into the picture and then have an existential discussion? No? That's a messy mashup? Well, okay then. I'll just take the humanistic approach with no frills. It's like a second frickin' adolescence. Yes, sorta. The learning never stops. Even if you want to be a YouTube funny man, you have to sit down and consider like how you're going to come about that. What is your personality behind the microphone? Took me 10 plus years to develop into what you see before you, and I still think the growing is not quite done. There's a lot of other YouTube stuff I want to try. Anyway, keep changing, learning, growing. OP says many of us became quick to forgive and or validate even the most egregious behaviors we observed. How clients tended to open up more easily when they felt like the therapist could understand their point of view, thus creating a strong therapeutic alliance. And no, the first years we didn't see real clients. We watched videotaped therapy sessions, observed the professors and more experienced students, and did a lot of classroom role plays. I had one mentor who encouraged a soft, squishy, validating approach. Why did I suddenly get a mental image of stepping in poop? Well, easy answer there, OP, is because we just put out our Don't Waffle Stomp on Me shirt over on Fourth Wall. It's the perfect combination for patriots who also enjoy stomping crap down the shower drain. It's a very small market, niche market, but I think we've cornered it. Anyway, check out the other offerings we have there. Thank you to everybody who has purchased merch thus far. We're working on expanding the line even as we speak. Anyway, OP says, I had another mentor who was all about tough love and accountability. Yeah, that's me right there. So it took a few more years of trial and error to strike a balance between validation and holding someone accountable in a non-combative way. Oh, non-combative, never mind, that ain't me. It probably comes as a shock to exactly no one that I ended up leaning towards a more warm, validating, humanistic approach. In my early professional years, I was asking the question, how can I treat or cure or change this person? Now, I would phrase the question in this way. How can I provide a relationship which this person might use for their own personal growth? That's a quote from Carl Rogers. Can't hold a candle to Fred Rogers, in my opinion, but I guess if you're a psychiatrist, you might feel a bit different. OP says, I let Funky get away with some seriously wackadoodle stuff because I thought he'd simmer down and open up about his feelings if I sat patiently and showed him kindness and acceptance. And to be fair, the approach does work quite well with most people, but not with Funky. I soon began to realize that Funky didn't have access to any emotion except for anger, and he was entirely incapable of articulating the roots of his rage or brainstorming ways to avoid angering situations. He worked himself into fits of fury because he just loved being mad.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always.
I mean, I can't tell you how to live, but sounds to me like a dog shit way to go through life. And then he'd whimper about his mental health, since that had gotten him off the hook in the past. When his wounded puppy act began to consistently fail, he resorted to threatening antics. He called in a bomb threat to the coffee shop where I worked for a brief spell, and I wound up losing that job because an employee with an unhinged significant other was considered a quote-unquote liability. I mean, yeah. Especially with threats of that nature, yeah, I see where the coffee shop is coming from. Funky also sent a letter to the psych department at my university, telling them that I was a quote-unquote emotionally unstable intimacy addict. And the real kicker here is that he implied that I had a drinking problem. I didn't get in trouble for this, but they called me to the office and asked if I was in a dangerous relationship. I admitted that I might have been, and they placed a call to social services. Nothing ever came of that. One of my professors followed up and checked on me a few weeks later. I wanted to work with her on some research projects, so I didn't want her to think that I was a weak, pathetic, self-loathing nincompoop. Yes, I now realize it's neither weak nor pathetic to ask for help. Even so, a buttload of people will call you weak and pathetic and stupid for getting into a bad relationship. I was terrified that this genuinely concerned professor would judge me, so I lied and said I was fine and that the letter was just a misunderstanding that we had managed to resolve. I mean, sort of not the greatest decision, but did you get to do the research projects? Soon enough, I noticed some Jersey Shore-looking dudes loitering in the parking lot of my apartment complex. They would call out to me, saying things along the lines of, "Hey, yo, Pixie, we're on behalf of the funk to keep you safe, little lady." I'm guessing Funky probably made up some malarkey about his wicked girlfriend and begged Maury to pay some dudes to wear tacky gold chains and stand around near my apartment. They were probably just actors desperate for a gig. They never threatened me, but they creeped me the hell out. That is a really weird display of affection. Funky, fortunately, never attacked me physically, although he loved to destroy my property. He peed on my social cognition textbook because he'd convinced himself that I was banging the professor. I wasn't. He smashed a glitter globe that I bought in Vegas when I was there for a friend's wedding because he'd gotten it in his head that I'd hooked up with one of the groomsmen. It was just a kiss on the dance floor, and it happened years before I even met Funky, but whatever. And then he singed my Merida costume when I booked a birthday party where they wanted a, quote, Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragons theme. Funky was jealous because George Gay was going as Hiccup, and fans of this mashup shipped our characters. I made it work, though. I said Toothless had burped fire on me, and the kids thought it was funny. Yeah, there you go. Look at you, making the best of a bad situation. My parents lived about 2 hours away, so running to the safety of my childhood home wasn't exactly convenient. Funky was too insecure to ever meet my family, so I was able to successfully hide from him at my parents' house on a few occasions. But academic and professional obligations invariably forced me to go back home, where the beard himself or his situation goons awaited me. My eldest brother lived in England, and my middle brother lived in the Bay Area, so even though they would have gladly beaten Funky to a bloody pulp, it's not like they were in a position to swoop in if he ever went nuclear. Very true, that's why we shouldn't rely on our siblings. Just buy a gun.
If you squeeze me, I make bad people go away.
You never felt more powerful than you did with 7 pounds of gunmetal in your hand. And of course, Funky was furious when he wasn't able to convince me to cut ties with my family, but oh, he tried. The beard mocked me for being a daddy's girl. Why is that something to be mocked? My dad is badass. Funky told me I should never forgive my older brothers for picking on me when I was little. The pranks and the merciless teasing are now a source of laughs with us. Who the hell holds a grudge against someone for playing a dumb prank when they were a literal child? Yeah, that's blood. You can't get over something like that. Me and my brother used to fight with, like, pieces of wood and PVC pipe. Like 10 and 12 years old, just beating the living shit out of each other. We forgave each other. We're still friends. Although now that I think about it, those battles might have awakened something. Perhaps more damage was done than I thought. Makes me sad to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Funky told me it was pathetic for a grown woman to be friends with her mother. Why? My mom's an awesome friend. None of Funky's ridiculous attempts to make me question my familial relationships worked, and so my safety net remained in place. Thank God for that. And I realized that it was extremely fortunate to have been able to maintain a safety net. Had I been forced to rely on Funky financially or move in with him, things could have been much, much worse. Yeah, we're just tiptoeing near the precipice, but we didn't fall in, so that's something to be grateful for. Soon enough, Funky realized that my parents had money. Not to the extent that Maury's family had money, but my parents were financially secure, and they helped all their kids financially from time to time. Admittedly, they helped me more than they helped my brothers because I was the baby and the only girl, so Funky started calling me a stuck-up rich bitch and tried to convince me to ask my parents for outlandish things. A mansion, a Lamborghini, money for posh dates or vacations, and of course I refused to do this. My parents helped me with rent and tuition, but I made it a point to never ask for frivolous crap. If I wanted frivolous crap, I'd save what I earned from my TA position, theater stipends, princess parties, burlesque. We eventually did get paid with money instead of drink tickets. Well, thank God for that. Nobody should be pulling their titties out for a vodka tonic, pasties or not. And yeah, all the random part-time jobs, like the one at the coffee shop that Funky ruined for me. Well, you're never gonna get a Lamborghini that way. You gotta step on some necks. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. That's why I'll never be rich. But wait just a second here. Maybe Funky refused to accept the breakup, even when he resented everything about me, because he thought that he'd eventually be able to get money from my parents one way or another. He would have been sorely disappointed, though. Knowing what I now know about the extravagant shit that he and Maury got up to when they were younger, he would have scoffed at the things that my family thought of as fancy. Plus, Maury's mommy was bankrolling Funky's entire life. I did not know that at the time. And yet, Funky still wanted more money teats to suck. I mean, what's better than one glass of Cambodian breast milk? That's right, 2.
Breast milk, you made my day.
As for running to my close friends with these relationship woes, Lucy was dealing with her own crushing disappointment after Silver came out of the closet, so I hated to unload my Funky troubles on her. George Gay was enmeshed in a beautiful new romance, not with Silver for the record, so I didn't want to disrupt his honeymoon phase. He was dating the guy who played Claude in Hair, and they were so friggin' adorable together. Speaking of hair, I'll tease a possible one-off in the next installment, and then I'll wrap up my sophomore slump at last. I'm confident that my third saga is gonna be funny! No clue what it'll be, but I feel like I have a better idea of what works and what doesn't. I got lucky and cranked out good cringe with the Funky P saga. The Married Mary saga didn't feel consistently well received, and I'm not upset about that, just taking a hard look at what I could have done differently. There you go, I like this progress, everything better than the last. It's just like making YouTube videos. Again, you make your little tweaks and improvements here and there. Maybe some people don't like this or that you did, but it feels more me than anything that I did before. And that's important. Here's what I've learned. Events taking place mostly in one location, a number of likable or at least tolerable characters, 1 or 2 deplorable creatures, and maybe a wild card. That works better than scattered events and too many characters to really get to know them properly. Keep the narrative linear. Too much introspection doesn't play to this particular crowd. Well, that's true. I personally enjoy it. Like the Stealthbeard saga was really slow moving. But sometimes it's worth stopping and taking the time to put other people in your shoes. Pants pooping, gross people being super inappropriate, and finally putting the gross person or people in their place, violently if necessary, will almost always go over well. That's true, especially if it's got some violence. And some element of the story needs to be uniquely disgusting or repulsively fascinating. That's what works. And as I've said before, I've encountered a lot of disgusting creatures over the years. Well, you've nailed down what works a lot better than even I have, and it's my freaking channel. A lot of the content lately is scattershot. We did super gross for a long time. Now I'm sort of trying to break out with some stuff, but I don't know, man. Neckbeard stories, they really do always feel like home. I don't think I'll ever truly leave it behind. So which one will I choose to put on blast? Deep dive into Cadillac Kirk? Deep dive into Fart Knockin' Jar Jar? The legbeard who ate makeup samples in Sephora? She's probably just a one-off. The creepy-ass student who stalked me once I became a professor, and then he made headlines when he got mugged by a toot, but he swore that he hadn't paid her for Boom Boom. He paid her to let him talk to her about Jesus for an hour because he just wanted to save her soul. Or is that too similar to Dennis? Maybe I could shine the spotlight on Nasty Norman. He's a good lead-in to the next installment. Well, I look forward to meeting all these characters and more. As long as you'd like to continue on the cinematic universe, I'm along for the ride. Gonna make a hell of a compilation, too. I don't know, I'll probably split it up. There's a 12-hour limit on these things, and usually something in the 4 to 6 hour range performs the best, but I'm just thinking out loud here. I'd like to learn more about Funky. I thought we'd wrap it up, but our time is spent for the day, so we'll get to it one more at some point down the road. Check out the fourth wall if you haven't yet. Hey, we've also got Patreon, my YouTube memberships, consistent money every month. Thank you so much to these guys for supporting. My goodness. I'll be shouting everybody out in their own special video in just another day or so keep your pants on for that. Join up if you want to hear me say your name or something. And I appreciate you, even if you can't support. You watched the video this far. What more can I ask? Except that you always remember, friends, that you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, bye-bye.
Many